The great disease of civilization is that we've confused the world of symbols with the world of reality. As I mentioned earlier, you already know what reality is. It doesn't need explanation. The moment you try to define it, you become a professional philosopher, and if you're not careful, you'll shrivel up and die from abstraction. But you know what reality is. It's this. And yet, we're in a very strange condition. We have made the goals of life out of things that exist only on paper. Take money, for example, the clearest case. There is no limit to how much you can earn if you're clever enough, ruthless enough. You can accumulate endlessly, but there are strict, very real limits to how much beef you can eat at one meal, to the amount of girls you can give, to whom you can give adequate satisfaction, to the number of houses you can live in, to the amount of clothes you can wear. Suppose you wore 3 different suits daily. That's over 1,000 a year. Eventually, it becomes absurd. You'll return to a favorite one, something that actually suits you. And it's the same with a house or with a woman. You can have many, but you'll always return to the one that feels like home. So while we chase limitless accumulation in symbols, real enjoyment, the kind you touch and feel, has very clear limits. And even here we must be careful, because when I say real, I don't mean merely physical or material. Those words, physical, material, are themselves ideas, concepts born of Western culture. You see, when someone says, "I'm a materialist, I believe only in matter," they're caught in fantasy, because the idea of matter is already a concept. These flowers in front of you, they aren't material in some cold, fixed sense. You can only know them by seeing them, touching them, being with them. What they are is pattern, movement, delight. Not a word, not a substance, but an experience. You see, most people walk through life without ever truly touching it. They are surrounded by their own mental constructions, names, definitions, expectations, mistaking the symbols for the thing itself. And so they live in a world of ghostly abstractions, never quite arriving where they are. We have been taught to navigate the world not through direct contact, but through signs and labels. We say we see a tree, but what we really see is color, shape, texture, light dancing on our eyes. The word tree is not the experience of the tree, just as the word fire does not burn your fingers. We are constantly reaching for life through a veil of language and thought. And the tragedy is, we believe that veil is real. We are so busy chasing the concept of life that we overlook the simple, extraordinary fact of being alive. Now, imagine this. You're sitting quietly, and a bird calls outside the window. You hear the sound, but almost instantly, your mind jumps in and says, "That's a bird." And then perhaps, "It must be morning." And then, "I've got things to do today." The moment is gone. You didn't hear the bird. You heard your idea of a bird. And so life passes by second, translated, filtered, reinterpreted through thought. It's as if we are always one step removed from the real. You see, we've become enchanted by the symbols. We read maps instead of walking the earth. We speak names instead of knowing things. And yet, Reality is not the word. It is not the thought. It is this breath, this texture of sunlight, this pressure against your skin. It is the sensation before it is named. That is the place where life happens. And until we come back to that, again and again, we are asleep inside the idea of being awake. Now, some people turn to meditation as a way of finding something, as if by sitting in a certain way, breathing in a certain rhythm, they will arrive at some glorious destination called enlightenment. But this is simply the mind continuing its game, seeking to gain, to grasp, to improve. Meditation is not a technique to achieve something better. It is not spiritual weightlifting. It is the art of being completely present with what is, without trying to fix it, change it, or run away from it. To meditate is to return to the simple experience of being alive. You don't silence the mind by force, just as you don't calm a pond by pushing the ripples around. You simply watch, listen, feel. The breath breathes itself. Sounds come and go. Thoughts appear and dissolve, like clouds in the sky. And in that seeing, something remarkable happens. You discover there is no separate self doing any of it. There is only the unfolding, the movement, the now. And in that now, you find something that no amount of effort can bring to you. You find that you were never separate from reality to begin with. Of course, once people begin to taste a little silence, a little spaciousness, the mind quietly slips in again and turns even that into a trophy. You see, there is a most curious game people play called spiritual one-upmanship. Someone goes off to a monastery, sits for hours with aching legs, returns home and says, "You wouldn't understand. I've endured the discipline. I've been to the mountain." And suddenly, silence becomes a badge, not a liberation. This is just ego in disguise, wearing robes instead of neckties. It is still the same itch to be someone special, to stand apart, to say, "I've got it and you don't." But if your practice makes you feel superior to someone else, you've missed the point entirely. Enlightenment, if it means anything, is the dropping of that very comparison. It is the realization that there was never anything to attain, and no one to attain it. You don't become spiritual. You notice you've always been a part of it. Like waves on the ocean, trying to outdo each other in height, never realizing they are made of the same water, moving in the same rhythm, returning always to the same stillness. Now, the trouble is we've come to confuse reality with the symbols of reality. So we keep going, on and on and on, always just a little more. And what is it we're after? Not the actual experience of life, but the promise of it, the story of it. We don't want the house, we want the identity that comes with it. We don't want to touch the earth, we want to own it. This is the disease of our civilization. The confusion of the menu for the meal, the idea of material for the thing itself. And as long as we believe that, fulfillment is something we'll find just around the corner, we remain exiles from the present moment, the only place anything real has ever happened. And then there's the whole spiritual industry, the guru racket, if we're honest about it. You see, there are two kinds of teachers in this world. One kind believes he's got something you don't have. He sets himself up as the authorized distributor of truth. He says, "Follow me, tithe your income, build temples in my name, and maybe you'll get a piece of the divine someday." That kind of guru doesn't set you free. He gets you hooked. And as long as you're dependent on him for your spiritual fix, the game continues. But there's another kind, the rarer kind, who wants to get rid of you. He's not selling religion as diet, but as medicine. And when the medicine works, you don't keep taking it. You walk away whole, free. And when you do, you say, that fellow, he was just marvelous. He gave me nothing at all, and in that I found everything. Real teaching liberates. It dissolves the illusion that there was ever anything missing. And in doing so, it puts the teacher right out of business. Now, there are, broadly speaking, two fundamental approaches to meditation. One is the way of intensity where you stretch, strain, concentrate with every fiber of your being. Like those monks who bow thousands of times down to the floor and up again, or the ones who run for miles through mountain trails, bounding like dancers, pushing the body to its edge. There's even a breathing practice in Yoga Kumbhaka where you hold your breath until you tremble. It's fierce. It's deliberate. And in the middle of all that effort, something curious happens. You reach what athletes call second wind. The ego steps aside, and suddenly the running runs you. The breath breathes you. You're no longer doing it. It's simply happening. Then there's the other way, quieter, subtler. You let go. You sit, and you don't try to control the breath. You don't attempt to silence the mind. You simply allow. You let sounds wash through you like wind through leaves. You feel the body as it is, not as it should be. And slowly, gently, you begin to see that awareness is already present. Not something you achieve, but something you uncover by not interfering. Both ways are valid. Both paths lead to the same silence. Now, of course, the difficulty for most people is this inner division, this strange belief that there is a separate me inside, a kind of little man in the head running the show, the thinker of thoughts, the doer of deeds, the one who ought to be in control. But who is this controller? Where is he hiding? If you go looking for him, you'll find he's nothing more than a ghost made of ideas, a symbol pretending to be the source. You see, the more you try to control your thoughts, the more they slip away. Try to stop your mind, and it chatters louder. Try to make it quiet, and you'll never hear the silence. We've divided ourselves, experience over here, and the experiencer over there. And then we wonder why we feel disconnected. But this split is an illusion. The observer and the observed are not two. The feeler and the felt are part of the same process, the same wave. As long as you believe there is a you watching life from the outside, you will never touch it. Let that go. Not by force, but by seeing there was never anything to hold in the first place. You see, one of the deepest illusions we suffer under is the idea that the body is some kind of solid, separate material object. Something, apart from spirit, apart from mind. But what we call matter is just an idea. It's a concept. You've never touched matter. What you've touched is warmth, texture, sensation, patterns of energy dancing in awareness. As modern physics now shows us, the body isn't made of stuff. It's a light show. A shimmering pattern of vibrations, electrical fields, fields within fields. It's not a thing. It's a process. A flame that never holds still. Like I said, this all too solid flesh is dissolving before our eyes. And when you really see it, when you drop your concepts and simply feel the body is no longer opposed to spirit, it is spirit moving, breathing, glowing. There's a figure in Buddhist iconography called Fudo, surrounded by flames, sword in one hand, rope in the other. Fudo means immovable, and yet he's on fire. He doesn't represent rigidity, but the stillness within the movement, the clarity within the fire. He is cutting through illusion, not with effort, but by showing what was never true to begin with. So then, what are we left with? Strip away the symbols, the striving, the labels, the need to control. What remains? Only this: the sound of the wind through the trees, the sensation of breath entering your nostrils, the light flickering behind your eyelids, the feeling of being without needing to call it anything. That, you see, is reality. Not the idea of reality, not the story you've been told, just this: the direct, unmediated, ever-changing flow of experience. And when you are truly with it, not naming, not judging, not trying to hold it still, you recognize something extraordinary. There's nothing to fix, nothing missing, nothing to attain. And so you laugh, because the whole search, the spiritual journey, the discipline, the effort, was all a play, a cosmic dance. And the joke is that what you were seeking was never apart from you. You only had to stop pretending. So I say to you now, let go of the illusion. Only your experience is real, and everything else was just a clever dream.